2024 is the first time I actually tried to keep up with game releases because it was such a stacked year for video games. A lot of games I was highly anticipating, as well as getting into genres I had previously little interest in. A lot of people say that there are no good games coming out these days, and I was probably a voice among that crowd, but this year showed me that a lot of people just aren't paying attention to games coming out, or they're not trying new games. This list is going to rank single player and co-op games based on my enjoyment. I have a whole separate list with multiplayer focused games, as those kind of take up a different spot in my mind. I play those for a different reason. I might do a follow-up video about those games, so keep an eye out for that. On the screen right now is the games that I'm currently playing, so they will not be making an appearance on this list. As with every list, something does need to be at the bottom. For me, it was unfortunately Power Rangers Rita's Rewind. I wouldn't expressly say that this is a bad game, just extremely simple. There are levels where you're on motorcycles or Megazords that are visual overloads at times, and you can't really tell what's happening. I think all this game really needs for it to be great would be the Rangers to play differently from each other, and more enemy variety would make it significantly better. There are a lot of fantastic beat 'em ups that have come out the last few years, so it's hard to look at this one and recommend it over those. Five Nights at Freddy's Into the Pit is a good game. It has incredible pixel graphics and some really eerie vibes. This game has a lot to offer, and for someone this could be exactly the type of game you'd want from the horror series. For me, the first I played in the series was Security Breach, and my friends and I had a great time passing off the controller while exploring the Pizzaplex. I was more looking for that type of experience to play with my friends, but this is still an enjoyable game even for someone who isn't as well versed in the lore as others. Metal Slug Tactics is a solid, short tactical RPG, and it has its good times to play in bursts. This game is different in a sense that the further your characters move in a given turn, the more dodge they receive, negating enemy attacks. It's supposed to emulate how the main Metal Slug games are run and gun, but it doesn't really play normally how I would like a tactical RPG to play. I usually take an offense is the best defense approach to these types of games. The more enemies you can take out in a given turn, the less damage potential they might receive. This game is a very objective-focused game, making the enemies on the map more of an annoyance rather than something you should be paying attention to. It's a cool game, unique for the genre, and also being a roguelike, but it has different focuses than what I'm normally looking for in a game like this. Zenless Zone Zero is really cool and flashy. I can totally get why people are into this game. For me, it can be hard to get into a game like this when it relies on me swiping my credit card repeatedly to play as characters I want to try. If this were a full-price game with a whole slew of characters to play as and progress through a story, I think it would be a lot higher on my list. In what's, I guess, widely considered a controversial take, I just simply think Balatro is good. It didn't blow my mind, I had a good amount of fun, and set it down probably faster than most. I'm not going to say anyone's wrong for falling in love with this game. Its simplicity is its biggest strength. From a roguelike, I think Hades is a shining example of what I would like. Tight gameplay that makes me want to get back into the action, gorgeous visuals, amazing music. Rather than wanting to dive right back into Balatro, I just felt discouraged when I would lose and I had a build I really liked going. I realize that isn't everyone, as that actually is motivation for some to go right back in, maybe even try a different build. Judging on online discussions of the game, I would say I'm in the minority of just simply liking this game, but I totally understand why this would be someone's game of the year. Talking earlier about the FNAF game that came out, I played another mascot horror game. Indigo Park is more so what I'm looking for with these type of games. Unfortunately, there's only one chapter out right now. However, I think the first chapter has a fun setup, and I like what they're going for. I was especially impressed by the voice acting, not something I was expecting to praise on a game like this, but they got some very talented people to voice the characters. I think Buckshot Roulette gave me the feeling that a lot of people got with Balatro this year. The decisions, the keeping track of the rounds, your health, the items versus the dealers, each round got me really excited and eager to jump right back in every time. TMNT Splintered Fate was a surprise for me, basically in a game that's like Hades but with co-op. I do think Hades is quite a few steps above this game, but where it shines is in that you can scratch that Hades itch, but also play with your friends. My biggest gripe with this game is that there are simply attacks that aren't possible to dodge in any way that I can see, making each run feel like I'm not getting better, I was just getting more health and damage negating items. Dragon Ball Sparking Zero is a game with a staggering amount of content. It's a worthy successor to a series that's been missing since the PS2, and it had a lot to live up to. On top of Dragon Ball FighterZ basically substantially raising the bar of how good a Dragon Ball game can look, Sparking Zero actually delivers on all fronts. There are some original Dragon Ball characters I'd like to see added, but it's hard to deny how amazing this roster is. It's a solid arena fighter that I think pretty much every fan will enjoy. Fairy Tail Dungeons was a surprise to me, especially me putting it up here because I didn't care for the game much at first. I think the runs were short enough to make it feel like it wasn't a huge commitment to play. It's not a hard commitment of your time or attention. It's not a giant game and doesn't try to be. It's just great for booting up on your Steam Deck and doing around while you do something else. Also, the music is pretty catchy. Now, this is one of the biggest releases of the year, and one I had been looking to for years prior. Palworld is not exactly what I was expecting, and it really isn't what most people say it is online. Palworld is more of a base building exploration game over a Pokemon ripoff third-person shooter. If you really enjoy resource gathering, building bases, automating processes, exploring a big map, I think this is the game for you. I think it is good at everything it does, but by that extent, it is also a master in none. It really just takes a lot of aspects from all the popular open world survival games that have come out over the last 10 years. I think in terms of a creature collector, it is a very good one. I enjoy plenty of Pokemon, Digimon, and I even dabble in indies like Temtem, and I think it stacks up with all those fairly nicely. There's a lot I could say about the hate for this game being overblown, but people likely have already made up their minds about that, so I'm not really going to bother getting into it. Instead of moving from town to town with a clear goal in sight, Palworld lets you loose, giving it an identity that I think justifies its existence. Another Code recollection is a game that I've built up in my head for a long time. I wanted the first game on DS when I was younger, but I wasn't really buying games at the time, so it was one that slipped through the cracks. I would see it in Nintendo Power, and it felt like a game that I would really enjoy on my DS. Well, here we are in 2024, and now we have a bundle of the DS game and the unreleased in North America Wii sequel on Switch. I can safely say that if you're into story-based puzzle games, you will have a good time with this. All the main cast members give a great performance, helping the characters feel more believable when you sometimes have to suspend your disbelief. By the end of it, I felt a little sad that we most likely will never be seeing this series again, but I'm happy that I finally got the chance to enjoy it. Frog Gun Encore was a sequel that I was kind of blindsided by. I'm a fan of the first game, and when this was announced, I thought it was just an enhanced port with a new co-op mode. Now having played it and beaten it, I can see that it is a full-blown sequel with fresh mechanics and a whole new game to explore. This game is kind of designed around co-op, so there is a fixed camera and the bosses aren't quite as challenging as the first game, but it still was a great time for both solo and with a friend. Chrono Arc is my favorite roguelike release this year. It's a standout like Hades is to me, in the fact that it has an intriguing world, likable characters, all with unique mechanics, and an awesome soundtrack with a story that you can chip away at with each run. Each run you will leave with 2 party members, then recruit 2 more later to make your party of 4, each with their own unique cards that will be added to your deck. You can find ways to synergize the mechanics of each party member together, making it fun to try different combinations. This is one of the games from the list that I'm going to keep playing for a long while to come. Stellar Blade surprised me for multiple reasons. I wasn't expecting it to be a Souls-like, which isn't entirely accurate, but it's definitely more in that camp versus a Platinum Games style action game. With tight gameplay, awesome soundtrack, and a flashy visual style, I can safely recommend this game. I remember at a point thinking I was soft-locked, unable to replenish on my supplies, and had to brute force my way through a boss. There are a lot of standout moments in this game, the later boss fights really testing your timing and ramping up the intensity. I wasn't sure how much I was going to like this game when I first started it, but in the end, I came around to loving this game. Tokyo Xanadu EX Plus came out and man was I missing out. I know it's only an enhanced port of the Vita game, but even though I'm a Vita fan, I actually never got this game. I fixed that this year with the Switch port, and I get why people love it so much. As a lovable cast of characters, fun dungeons and battle mechanics, and an interesting story that I think I was pretty absorbed with from the moment I started until I finished it. If you're on the fence, all I can say that if you like action RPGs and dungeon crawlers, this is the game for you. Now, this statement's going to be a bit of foreshadowing, but a certain other Type Moon visual novel really opened my eyes up to the genre. I like the Fate series from Unlimited Blade Works, Zero, and Heaven's Feel, but never knew the route that you're supposed to start with. All of a sudden, Fate Stay Night Remastered dropped, and I decided to finally read what should have been my introduction to the series. Unlike the anime, you get to know more about what Shiro is thinking through the visual novel, making some of the character flaws that aren't necessarily apparent in your face here. Given the entire experience to be had here is the story, I can still say, even with my prior knowledge, this was still worth picking up and playing. I grew to love some characters more, and hurt seeing what happened to others. The artwork isn't quite as gorgeous as some of their later works, but that comes secondary to the quality of the story and characters here. I didn't play the original release of Shin Megami Tensei 5. I sat on it, knowing I'd get to it someday. Well, that day finally came when they released Vengeance. I picked it up and started right away and didn't look back. I did the new route in this version of the game, and all the reviews you see are right. I hesitate to call this a creature collector like a Pokemon game, but that is essentially what this game is. You recruit demons, fuse them to make stronger ones, do quests and special fusions to get others. At first I wasn't sure if this would be for me, but after the initial push through the first area, you get deeper into the story and the characters you barely got introduced to finally get fleshed out. The plot wasn't something I thought I'd get invested in either, but I ended up caring about what was going to happen. Vengeance is absolutely worth your attention in a year full of great JRPG releases. It is one of the standouts. Most people would not put Visions of Mana above most of the games below this, and I cannot blame them for dropping this game. The beginning can really be a slog. It repeatedly takes away control from the player after letting them move for only like 5 seconds. Then, when you finally get to the initial combat, it is incredibly basic. The game starts to hit its stride when you start getting elemental vessels, which will change your party members' classes. This is finally when the gameplay starts to get as interesting as the game's story, which is a very good hook from the beginning. Once you start building out your favorite party members with abilities from different classes and pulling off some really cool moves and combinations, you start to see what they were going for with this game. The main cast all gives amazing performances. I was especially surprised by Val. Not going into what causes it or any spoilers, but this character goes through some pretty drastic and at times harsh development. What was cool to me was not only seeing these changes from his perspective happen, but hearing them as his character grew. The whole main cast did a fantastic job. There are some side characters that sound like they just found some guy off the street, but the main cast carried through that and had me happy that I stuck through the game so I could experience what Visions of Mana had to offer. Sega finally decided to give Shadow a leading position in his own story for Sonic X Shadow Generations. For a while the character has felt one-dimensional, being relegated to the edgy guy that shows up occasionally on Sonic's journey. This game was hopefully a reminder to both Sega and the audience that he is more than capable of being the leading character. The 3D and 2D levels of this game are fast and fluid, and the new Black Doom abilities add a new layer of what they can do for the level design in this game. If I could have asked for one thing, it'd be for some characters that haven't had much screen time in a while to have more with Shadow, just talking to them a bit longer. In general, I think Shadow's portion could have been longer, but at the same time, it's better to leave the player wanting more than to be bored and wish it was. This is the game I'd consider to be the people's champ of the year. Astrobot is an absolute blast, a super high-polished platforming adventure we rarely get outside of indies and Nintendo. The controls are tight, the challenge levels are super fun, and another aspect I didn't think I'd care much for is getting all the bots and seeing all the references. It's a celebration for all things PlayStation for the 30th anniversary, and well deserving of all the praise that it's getting. It's hard for me to condense into a small blurb on why I love Unicorn Overlord so much. It's got so much to it. Gorgeous visuals that make you feel like you're watching a moving painting, a great soundtrack that nails the feeling of going on an adventure, thought-provoking levels with loads of strategy to it, and a rich world with tons of diverse areas that add their own twist to level design and gameplay. Everyone who I've recommended this game to and has tried it loved it. You can get so deep into your builds for each character, while making it super accessible in the beginning and easing you into the deeper mechanics. This is the type of game that we don't get often, and I'm so glad to have supported such an amazing game. Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 is everything good about the third-person shooter genre in one clean package. This game is brutal and somehow nails making you feel like an invincible badass, but it can take away that in a second and make you feel hopelessly overwhelmed. There isn't a plethora of weapons or missions, but each one is so varied that it doesn't feel like it needs to shove hundreds of guns that basically all play the same in your face. Its biggest strength is that every mission, every moment, and every boss is exciting and memorable. Admittedly, I'm not well versed in Warhammer lore, but this game was so fun that it's going to be my gateway into it. Tsukihime is really something special. It's lived rent-free in my head since I started it. Nothing on this list, including what comes after, occupies my thoughts more. They were something that I wanted to try, but I had a stigma about them that I didn't shake until booting this up. It has a gripping premise, interesting lore, captivating characters, gorgeous visuals, top-notch voice acting, and the soundtrack can shift from calming to eerie masterfully. None of this is to say it's without its problems, but the positives outshine everything else for me. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Where do I begin? The scale of this world is daunting, and even more so when you realize how packed every place is with things to do. As I got deeper into the combat, I wondered if I could even go back to playing Remake without feeling bogged down. Some characters have a lot more fun playstyles than others, namely Barret and Aerith usually sat as reserves. This game has combination moves now, just adding to the fun of using everyone. And the music is perfect. Every song that they've redone for these remake games has gotten even better than I thought they could be. There's even storytelling within the music, giving even more reason to go through and listen to everything again. One thing you could say is a downside of this game is it's much better if you play the original Final Fantasy VII. I would suggest playing FF7 before starting this game if you truly want to get what they're going for with this new series. I've seen a lot of takes, both good and bad, regarding this game, and it was obvious to anyone that remaking such a beloved game was going to divide people. I'm not going to spoil anything about this game. What I do want to say is in regards to its story is that things started to come together for me in regards to the changes they were making from the original game. I'm not just talking about narratively, I mean why the writers chose to make these changes in the first place. While Square Enix does have games that have fantastic stories and lovable characters, since the release of Final Fantasy VII, it seems they had no idea who the characters we traveled with and got invested with were. After I beat the original, I got excited knowing that there was all this other media for me to jump into. But that excitement hit a speed bump after Advent Children. Ever since the release of Final Fantasy VII, every piece of media that they've been involved in has had the characters acting like weird caricatures of themselves. Everyone's boiled down to one-dimensional weirdos who don't know how to interact with other human beings. Remake and Rebirth have finally succeeded in making the characters finally act like themselves again, flaws and all. I can't believe I have faith in these maniacs to stick the landing, but I do. When I reached the end of this game, I finally understood all the odd choices and where they were going with the series. This is the game that inspired me to play so many games this year. This is the game that had me staying up till 3 AM after working 12-hour shifts every day. This is the game that reminded me why I love video games in the first place. The story, gameplay, characters, and music are all some of Atlus's finest work. I started playing this series with Persona 4, which hooked me immediately. Persona 5 didn't get me quite as much right away, but I still loved that game. I sat on Persona 3 for years, knowing one day I'd sit down and play it, but a game collecting dust in the backlog is something I think many of us can relate to. I bought Reload day one, hoping to get engrossed. The last game that really grabbed me was Dragon Quest XI's, and since playing that I found that sense of boredom when starting in a new game. When I finally did convince myself to start something, I just get discouraged at the slightest thing and put it down. I was worried that would be the case here again. I'd boot up Persona 3 Reload, and inevitably put it down. That was not the case at all. Every moment I could, and even at times when I should be doing something else, I'd be playing this game. It's cast as one of my favorite in any JRPG, every character having their own motivations, their own world that you gotta interact with over the course of the game. It does such a good job making you care about each of them. I haven't cared so much about my party members since probably Mass Effect 2. Even if you don't play games, Persona's music is famous. In my opinion, this has the best soundtrack of the latest 3 games. It's just banger after banger. It's amazing how many of these songs I keep listening to after beating the game. I realize that this game isn't perfect, but I was in the perfect spot in my life to play this. Overloaded with work, this game provided the perfect escape. I think a lot of times the thing that matters most when it comes to our enjoyment of any form of entertainment is where we are in life when we play something. I happen to be in the perfect state of mind for this game to come out, and it has cemented myself as one of, if not my favorite game ever made. Thanks for making it to the end of this list. For those curious about the games I haven't finished yet, I'll say a few words before ending the video. I'm about 40 hours into Metaphor ReFantazio, and it has the making of another Atlus masterpiece. It hasn't sucked me quite as hard as SMT5 Vengeance or Persona 3 Reload yet, but I'm enjoying the story and characters a lot. Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door is one of my childhood games. I remember loving it, but I couldn't really tell you a ton as to why, and I certainly never beat it back then. I'm really enjoying this remaster, and it's a lot more colorful and charming, and just as funny as I remember. Romancing Saga 2 is my first time playing the series, and I'm really enjoying it. I like the battle and formation system, and all the party members have unique roles that give you a reason to experiment and use everyone. I'm not going to spoil anything, of course, but I will say the plot is not what I expected it to be. It's starting to get interesting, and I'm looking forward to playing this game more. For Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, I was really looking forward to this one. They nailed the vibe. It really does look, feel, and sound just like the old movies. It feels like a proper sequel to The Last Crusade. The presentation and score are just filled with love for the original movies. I do like this game a lot so far, however I'm prone to motion sickness and something about this game is not agreeing with my nausea. I've played on both my Xbox and my PC and changed the settings that I normally do to fix this, however this one is still getting to me. Because of that, it's been hard to convince myself to go back. I might try streaming it to my Steam Deck or something to have it on a smaller screen, but it really does feel like a game I'd like to play on my TV and treat like a movie. Nine Souls is freaking cool. It's got tight gameplay, awesome enemies and bosses, and honestly what has me the most is the plot. It's shockingly good. I went in expecting not to care, but honestly I really do about what's happening. This is sort of a Souls-like Metroidvania, having you run around a giant maze, timing rolls, and memorizing attack patterns. If that sounds at all interesting to you, you really should check this game out. The final game I began is Dream Tactics. It's a cutesy tactical RPG with a GBA-inspired aesthetic. My first Fire Emblem was Sacred Stones, so this seemed right up my alley. The story is funny, but so far there isn't a whole lot to it. Rather, it's about the gameplay, and selecting the right gear and abilities to equip your character. There seems to be a surprising amount of depth to what you can do in this game. I'm really looking forward to finishing this one soon. I didn't even get to everything I wanted to play this year. I could have managed my time better, but I'm satisfied with 26 single-player co-op games completed. I also had 13 multiplayer games I played, which I'll discuss in another video. If it wasn't obvious by the way I talked about the games on this list, 2024 is probably my favorite year of gaming. I hope this video shows a fraction of the sheer variety. I think there's something for everyone. I'm going to put a list of games on the screen that I either didn't get to or never got, but I did want to play. The craziest part is there's probably even more that I would enjoy that I didn't even know about. Thanks for watching, and check out my multiplayer games list if you want to hear me talk about some of those.